All right. So this is the material. I've been soaking it in water because we've had a drought for about a month now. And we have tried to water it, but there's really nothing quite as good as rain. Interesting. You can see like a little, you can see the seed, some sort of black thing in there. I'm not sure if that's part of the plant or something that has taken up residence in the plant. And so it can be squeezed, and then all of this comes out into the menstruum, which is the Berkey water. And it can be smelled. And oh, I wish I could share the smell with you. It's really amazing. So you guys can squeeze it. You can do whatever you want. I would recommend that you spot test it before you smear it all over your face, because you don't know how it's going to react. And yesterday as I was preparing it, I got a little bit of dermatitis. And I'm not quite sure why, because I've never seen that happen from that. So I'm not sure, but my skin is a little strange. So we have it in our 20-liter alembic, and it's been heating up for about the past hour and a half. It's already starting to turn brown. And goopy. You don't have to worry about that because we're distilling. So yeah, the color's already starting to fade. Can you see that?
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's the texture.
Can you smell it?
Yep.
You guys didn't squeeze it enough. You gotta squeeze it.
That thing.
Squeeze it. And so next we'll go ahead. Are we pretty good? We're pretty good. We've got will you come and help me check this out? So this still was ordered from Portugal.
Really?
It was handmade per order from a company that only makes alembics. They have a very large variety. I went back and looked at their site, and they have a really huge variety of alembic stills now. And so, as I mentioned before I started the recording, the copper goes down into this receptacle and spirals around. And then behind it are hoses that are going into a cooler, which has now been started. Let me go ahead and take a picture.
I love your outfit, Alana.
Thank you.
That's pretty.
Gold.
Gold
Colors.
We turn the heat up a little bit.
Let me put the flour on first. Is that sufficiently tempered down?
Well, once the flour starts really sticking once it gets warmer.
Oh yeah.
Moisture, steam coming up from the crop, so that's when you start adding it. Usually that's how you do it. Press down on it. You don't want to jam it. You just want to.
Okay.
You hear it talk.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me what this is.
What?
This is the rye.
This is actually tough. Okay. Because we went to
I see what you're gonna do.
several different. We went to 2 different stores, and we were not able to find the rye. So we're going to use tough instead, which is perfect.
Right for sealing around.
So this is kind of one of the more challenging aspects of it.
I gotta make it thicker.
Yeah,
Needing more than you think.
I think I'm going to need to make another batch too, because this will probably cover the bottom.
Need more water?
I have a picture of water here. So this is how they did it back in the day.
Crazy.
Not how it's been done through time. Okay, bingo. That's working really well.
You got the right texture.
Yeah.
It's easy to clean up later.
It's very easy. And, you know, you see how pro I am. I keep saying next time I'm going to do it really perfectly, but I always end up just smudging it around. You just want to put something on there so that the steam doesn't escape.
Mm-hmm.
And has anyone ever seen a distillation? Oh, there's some comments in the chat.
You have so many things to do at once.
It's okay. Once all this gets done, it'll all get settled in, and then I'll start talking. Hey, how are you doing? Sally and
My new
Lex.
neighbor.
Nice to meet you. Welcome. Have some tea, have some water, and have a handout. Make sure you have a handout. Now, those of you who are on the computer on Zoom, the very last post that I put up has copies of the handouts. Sorry about
No,
that.
that's okay.
It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's 83 degrees. Here in Florida, Eastern USA.
Look for an umbrella. if you'd like.
Sure, if you want.
No, don't blame me. Oh my God. No, I'm good. I can handle it. Thank you though.
Want a hat?
No, I'm good.
We have lovely hats. Okay. One more little
Not squeeze it. It's fine. It's almost like a gooey. Smells like ginger to me.
Can you smell it?
It's perfume.
Okay, do you want to come fiddle with the temperature now? I really need to check the chat. Sorry, I haven't checked the chat. Looks a bit like pink pine cone. Yes, and it's often called pine cone ginger. It's also called canoe ginger. The product, okay, so we have the prime material is the ginger that looks like this. And the menstruum, which is the liquid. And so what's going to happen is it's going to heat up, and we have this optional column that we use the column every time. We've been using it every time. We know it works, but you can just take this hat and put it directly down there. And so my thinking on this, after having really, there's very little written material about how to do distillation that's out there. And the written material about alchemy is enigmatic and confusing at best. And so I think that the best way to really do this is to just practice. So once upon a time, I got really sick, and I decided that the doctors weren't going to help me. So I went and got an education on herbal medicine myself through Rosemary Gladstar's herbalism training program. It took me 3 years to accomplish that. And there was a lot of really fascinating things. You know, I like to really approach things from a very broad spectrum. So I wanted to learn alchemy. It's very congruent with a lot of my interests. And so I got the still. And as you entered, you also saw the socklet, because since this is so large, you really can't do small quantities like rose, jasmine, small quantities of plant matter. So the socklet, you can do small quantities like that, although you use an alcohol distillation. There's 3 different Saclet percolations that I've made. If any of you are brave enough to open up the thing and smell it, you'll find that it smells okay. It smells kind of like alcohol. It's more preserved, right? So this is going to become moldy in a very short period of time. It has bacteria, it has all kinds of horrible things. But
After we squeezed it.
yeah, well, I mean,
We
you know,
added
and the
to the
birds
germ.
and the clouds and everything. So, but this is because it's going through a distillation process, it will be refined and it will be more stable. And I wish that I did have quite a bit of Awapuhi, but I was making the mistake of freezing it in mason jars. So guess what happened? They all cracked. So I've switched to plastic jars now with a lot of my stuff, but I don't have any Awapuhi to show you.
The
In
final
fact,
product.
the one that I found in the back of my spare freezer was all dried out and cracked.
Sort of evaporated.
Unrecognizable.
Didn't make it. We'll just say it didn't make it. So I'm going to do another batch of the rye, and you're going to fiddle around with the heat, right?
Yeah,
Looks
wait
like
for the
it's
heat to make
heating.
it to the
Is
top.
it? Looks like it's getting.
It is.
So I think with this stack, what you're going to get is a more refined process, because as the heat interacts with the material, the steam is going to rise and it's going to hit this hat. This is called a hat. And once it does that, it's going to transform, go down the gooseneck into the coils where it's going to be cooled rapidly. And then there's a little hole down there at the bottom with a mason jar underneath it. And the distillate will come out into that mason jar. And from the amount that I put in here, I would expect to get 3, maybe 4. I tried to keep it low. I tried to keep the
And
amount
that
of
was
food low.
a lot of Awapuhi in there.
It's a lot of
Yeah.
Awapuhi, but you know, you can never have too much.
Should have brought some from my house. I have some in my garden too.
Yeah.
And that was part of my interest in coming, because I don't really, I love seeing it, and I love every now and then I'll bring in a raincoat inside that I pick from my yard.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful, but like you said, in a few days, it starts to,
Yeah.
have a weird sound.
Cheers.
I knew there must be something more I'm doing.
Right, that's not the end of its life.
One may have medicinal.
Mhm. And some shampoo.
Yeah. that's what's
Everybody
really
is interested in the shampoo.
Mhm.
And there's no mystique to the shampoo. All you do is you just squeeze it and put it in your hair. That's it.
Good.
You don't have to mix it with anything.
Nope.
There you
Paul
go.
Mitchell would disagree with that, but
So
Paul
if my
Mitchell
ginger is
can make it
getting dry in my garden, it's just because we haven't had a lot of rain.
Yeah, I mean, mine hasn't even flowered yet, so I know that it's
Right.
nowhere near its life cycle
what are
completion.
the flowers like?
Sure.
White?
They're little white
Right.
flowers that come up from the side.
Okay,
Right.
because I haven't seen mine flower, but I've been there for a year now.
So it has all
Okay.
these kind of flaky things, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could
Even
even
pine cone.
pull it off.
They call it pine cone ginger.
Guess I could use that to mix in with my rye. We're
Mhm.
not getting too hot. We're getting hot.
Getting there.
Oh my
What do
gosh.
you want it to be at? What temperature does it want to be at?
It just really isn't super accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, we could probably get one of those laser pointer things. I'm really more like feeling how hot,
Mm-hmm.
because the heat, this is like too hot to touch. This is really hot. I'm just gonna put my hand on it here.
So here in Southeast Florida, people have pinecone ginger growing in their yard like crazy. We
Yeah.
call it Florida ginger. It's called Hawaiian ginger. It's called Awapuhi. It originated in India and spread to Polynesia, and then it traveled, and it's probably just all over the place.
Yeah, I had it in South Florida too.
It spreads through rhizomes. The flower has no beneficial properties because it doesn't spread through seed propagation. It spreads through rhizome propagation. So while it would be nice to have the flower because they're very pretty, they kind of stick out from those flaky side things. They're really not necessary. And it spreads a lot, but it's not that hard to control. I mean, you could mow it over, but it's a nice landscape plant. It grows, there's 3 different kinds of gingers. There's edible gingers, which would include turmerics, galangals, you're all different varieties, Indian, Jamaican. There's many different, there's black ginger, white ginger, yellow ginger. And there's ornamental gingers that are only used for the yard. And then there's what's called bitter ginger. And so Awapuhi is a bitter ginger.
Starting to get,
A little bit more heat.
well, it's starting to get a few drops.
Oh no, slow it down, turn the heat down. This is maybe like the, I don't know, 5th or 6th time that we've done this for the community.
We've also done it with pine.
We've done it with pine because, after the hurricanes, we'll come through and collect the pine. This is edible, believe it or not. Most people actually don't want to eat it because it's kind of bitter. Ooh, just a little bit more. Yeah, you can pass that around.
Yeah, I thought I'd pass it around.
That
This
sounds
is
great.
the extract that it comes out.
Oh, wow.
You
That-
kind of have to like play with the balance between heat and cool so that it comes out. You don't want to see steam come out of the little hole.
No, or you don't want to see steam come out of here either.
So we're gonna cover it.
Oh, it's hot.
Alana, what are you
Get the
doing
backside of
now?
it.
So why don't you just do it all? Thank you. And then I can go ahead and wash my hands here.
Are you using the flour to seal the edges? Is that what
I'm-
he's doing there?
Right, that is actually teff flour. It's an Ethiopian flour called teff. And so it has enough of the gluten in it to sort of hold together since I was unable to find the
Right flour.
the rye flour. So that prevents the steam from coming out of the
Oh,
sides. See, that's what you meant when you said flour.
right,
That-
right.
That's this one.
we were thinking about using
This is the
wheat.
backup.
That's wheat, but this is tough. I bought this at an Ethiopian store in Atlanta.
I have to smell everything. I'm all about smell.
That's good. Smell. Alrighty.
Smells like Ethiopian flour. I like that.
And here's our first draught. And when I get a little bit more, I'll show it to you because it's hard to see. Okay. Okay. So having an alembic was a natural extension of my spiritual interests, my psychological interests, and my interest in plants, because it really combines a lot of this. I did make a post, but in case you didn't get to see it, plants are the perfect medium for the cultivation of spirituality and connection to source. We were connected to source. When we were connected to source, we were connected to the plants, and consciousness was shared. The plants haven't lost that shared consciousness. So when we work with plants, we are reminding ourselves on deep unconscious levels of this stored information that we have of a world that could be created if we were still in that connected place. the alchemically transformative plant rituals, right? And everything that you do with a plant is alchemically transformative, just as pretty much everything that's done with intention is alchemically transformative. We harvest, we cultivate, we nourish, we plant, we compost, we watch, a lot of watching when it comes to plants. And this creates a relationship which naturally raises our consciousness. I did want to mention, I mentioned a few things about where the locations. There's a lot of materia medica that can be done with Awapuhi. And so if anybody has anything, because we're all experts on Awapuhi here in Florida, right?
No.
If anybody has anything that they want to mention, there's about 10,000 varieties of ginger. And in Hawaii, Awapuhi is dedicated to the god Cain. That I didn't do a whole lot of research on that because I focused on the alchemy part today. But it's interesting. It said something about no trespassing when I was looking it up. So it's protected by some kind of spirit. So the bitter ginger, you can eat it. You can eat the roots. You can eat the young shoots. You can drink the fluid that comes out of the flower. Again, I would be really careful with it. I noticed that I didn't get any red spots from putting it on my wrist this time. So maybe it had something to do with something else that I touched, but you just want to make sure before you ingest anything that you're not allergic to it. Another thing that's really nice, and I wish I had thought of this earlier, but you can take the leaves, are very long, and you can take those and you can wrap them in meats.
They're pretty leaves.
And they'll infuse a bit of flavor into your product, like fish.
You could wrap fish and cook it.
Yeah. It's often used in ovens that are built into the ground, or even clay pots are good ways, probably over direct fires in a lot of locations that Awapuhi grows. Very hot, very humid locations. I think that the liquid that we get, okay, now is when I want to pull this off. Can you pull it off? This is the top draught. That's the top draught. You can see that it has a little bit of milkiness to it.
Oh, wow, it's even stronger.
So I think that you can take that and put it in a dropper bottle with a little bit of Chopin vodka.
Oh, don't even start with me on that.
And I think you'd have something pretty tasty there.
Take that Chopin out.
That's what I'm going to do with it. It's used medically, it's used in every way that ginger is ever used. It's, got remarkable benefits for digestion and for motion sickness. It's considered to be an anti-inflammatory. Bitter ginger specifically is good for internal parasites, which I firmly believe everyone needs to be treating themselves
Deworming.
for. Everybody needs to be treating themselves once or twice a year for parasites. It's also used in traditional Chinese medicine. They take the root, they grind it up, they dry it, and then they make a tincture with alcohol out of that. And I'm not sure what that's used for. But I would imagine it's, it would be a really nice, any of the things that I just mentioned, it would be a really strong preparation for that. And then a lot of people like to use it on their skin and their hair. It makes your hair really pretty. I didn't use it today, just in case you were wondering. Otherwise, my hair probably would be a little more cohesive and not quite as frizzy. Okay. Any questions on use, the plant or the still thus far?
Do you use it in your hair again?
You just squeeze it into the bowl and put it on your hair.
And
You
then
can rinse
rinse
it
it?
out if
Yeah.
you want, but you could also leave it. I've used it and I've wrapped my hair up in terry cloth and left it overnight, and I haven't noticed any hair loss or damage. So I don't know. You probably don't really need to rinse it out at all.
You put some water, a little water in the bowl first.
Well, I only did the water in the bowl because we've had so much drought.
Oh, right, that's why I was wondering.
And if we didn't, then it would come out and it would be more gooey, like an aloe vera.
Like mine were
Right.
when you squeezed the ones at my
Right.
house.
But if you put it in water, it kind of brings it back. I guess that's what I was thinking, because everything in my yard's dry. And so I'm trying to think, how can I get back to a nice state? Yeah.
One of these.
How much does this still like this cost?
Oh, I don't remember. $400,
Okay,
somewhere in
yeah.
there. And they have a lot more of these available now. You know, I've never made alcohol in it, but I would love to. I think that would be a lot of fun. I think if I could get my hands on a lot of fresh wormwood, I'd be really happy.
Well, we're growing some right there.
Yeah, but you can see, I mean, you need 2 large bushy plants.
This is
would be
wormwood
sufficient.
Bolivian, or what is it?
Absinthe.
No, but I mean, is it from Bolivia, or where is the wormwood from?
Tallahassee Nursery. That's wormwood grows in partially shaded areas that have a lot of water. It needs high amounts of water and not necessarily full sun. Some sun, but not full 8 hours like a lettuce or a broccoli. So it's probably going to be like a lot of areas where the temperature is below, not above 90, which is why we struggle. It's really hard to grow it in Florida because it gets so hot. And it doesn't tend to like it a whole lot. But there are people who do it. There are people who dedicate, you know, just focus on it and make it happen, and it can be done. So common wormwood is native to Europe. That's what I was thinking, but has become naturalized in Canada and the United States. The common name alludes to the fact that the plant has a long history as an intestinal anti-thelmintic drug used against parasitic worms. So the standard 3 are wormwood, clove, and black walnut. And now a lot of people add mimosa pudica to anti-parasitics. Nowadays, people are very interested in anti-parasitics, but those were the classic 3. So let's talk a little bit about alchemy now.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Well, 2 things. The menstruum, the liquid, what is that in that again? That's the ginger flower.
The liquid, the menstruum itself, is water that I filtered in my Berkey water filter.
Okay, got it.
Got it?
Yeah, and then the other question, did you talk about the intestinal parasites and the plant's uses for that?
Plants used for that, for the parasites?
Well, you said that the, what is it, the ginger flower can be used for intestinal parasites, right? And you recommend that twice a year?
No.
Oh.
I mean, if you had nothing else to use, then you could use that. But since we have Vitacost, I would recommend that you got something that was formulated specifically for parasites rather than trying to use. I really wouldn't do a whole lot with the plant, with the Awapuhi plant. I would use it in my hair. I would use it, put it in your bath. If you're getting a sample, you can use it in a beverage, but I wouldn't really use it medicinally unless you really understand what it is, because it's very bitter, and so you could have some negative reactions to it.
I see.
And parasites are horrible anyway. I don't know if you've ever done a parasite cleanse.
No, I haven't.
Very, very challenging to your system. So you don't need to add the burden of an unknown element to that. I tend to err on the side of caution when it comes to using plants as medicine.
Okay, thank you.
You gonna move to a shadier spot? Okay, I understand. So old alchemy. Y'all have heard about transforming base metals into gold, right? We all know that. And I think that we all have a basic understanding that gold is a metaphor. There are alchemists, there are lots of alchemists who will argue all day long that this is a physical practice that is happening in reality, that this is not metaphorical, that this is real, and that what they're really trying to create is either gold or a purified, refined substance. But a lot of people will look at it from a metaphorical standpoint, and I do as well. I look at it as a symbolic transformation of ridding oneself of what we no longer need, what we're holding on to that isn't helpful for us, and purifying ourselves so that we become light, we become more spiritual, we become the end result, really. And so when we observe an alchemical process, we're participating in it, we're making it happen, our consciousness is shared with it. That is in and of itself transformative as well. It's really all about the intention and the consciousness that you put into what you do. And then when we have these very special things that highlight these processes in very unique ways, we can then take those ideas and apply them to life. Everything that we do with conscious intent becomes alchemically transformative. So biological, paleogenesis, transformation. Paleogenesis is an alchemical term. So we have biological, which is what we are doing with the plant, and we have spiritual, which is what we are doing with ourselves. Taking ourselves out of our own densities, as well as our own concepts of duality, and moving into something more purified and refined. There are a lot of people who talk about dissolution of the ego as part of that process, but I'm going to talk about that in detail quite shortly. So I'm going to leave it for now. So way back when, 38,000 years ago, 38 and 3 zeros, a long time ago. So we're talking about mythology. There was a person named Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes thrice wise, who handed humanity knowledge of alchemy. And there was a tablet called the Emerald Tablet. And I did post an image of that tablet on the Facebook page that mythologically was given to humanity. And you can follow the history of this thing quite a bit. There's some incredible stories. Some of them may be true, some of them maybe not. Apparently it was discovered at one point in time. Do you remember the date for the Cheops? Found under the Temple of Cheops.
Several thousand BC, I think.
Somebody was crawling underneath the pyramid trying to rob it and came upon this glowing green thing that had basically the writing that's on these pages, right? This is the translations. I've got 3 different translations for you. We have no evidence. There's no physical emerald tablet that exists today.
Yeah, it was said to be a good size, like a couple feet by a couple feet thick chunk of cinnamon that was flat, and the writing was raised, as though it had been poured. Someone a great alchemist had created a liquid and then poured it in a mold to create emerald, that it solidified as emerald.
Wow. And so in case you couldn't hear that, what he said was that it was poured, it was poured into a 3 by 3 foot tablet made of emerald. That's the myth. There's a really wonderful name associated with alchemy, Paracelsus, who lived from 1493 to 1541. A lot of really interesting things were happening during that time, by the way. There was a real renaissance in thinking. A lot of really interesting things all over the world were happening. And Paracelsus was studying alchemy because this was the beginning of medicine, right? It was the beginning of astronomy. It was the beginning of chemistry. A lot of our understanding of the world came from early alchemists, but at some point in time, it was divided out. Oh, gee, I wanted to tell you guys this story. I went to a medical provider the last week, and I was asking him about an alternative treatment. And he said, you know, me and my colleagues, we all think that that's hocus pocus. And I thought of what I would be doing today and kind of chuckled. My feelings were slightly hurt. Like he said it like it was a bad thing.
Should have invited him.
Oh, I don't think I'm going to be using him for my medical thing. So Paracelsus talked about the body being a chemical process. This was new. It was a new thought. And that you could add something to the body and that it would become improved. And so the version that's often brought down in the history books is mercury for syphilis, which we now know is a very bad idea. It probably doesn't help syphilis at all. But I have to wonder if maybe he just got the credit for something that herb grannies have always known that you could go and there were certain substances that were going to affect your physical well-being. You know, we're not talking about the way that we treat herbs and supplements today is still a very allopathic way of thinking about it as opposed to holistic. So if you have, for example, a parasite, you could take a wormwood and that will make your parasite go away. Versus the notion that you want to make sure that you have a very strong terrain theory, that the body is a landscape, it's an ecosystem. And so you nourish your terrain by taking in lots of green vegetables, right? 50% at least of your diet, having lots of fresh air, lots of sun, lots of direct physical contact with the ground, and good times with good people, right? That's how you create a healthy terrain. And when you have a healthy terrain, then you're far more resilient to disease. And so I want to offer to all of you right now that you think about, I'm not feeling well, let me do things that nourish me, rather than here's a substance that I can take that will knock out my headache, right? What if you've gotten to the point where you have the disease, the disharmony has already been present, not to neglect the importance of the emotional aspects of that as well, being emotionally balanced. But we live in such a toxic world that it's really hard to maintain that. So 3 important things to know about in alchemy: sulfur, mercury, and salt. Sulfur represents the spirit or the soul. Also a good anti-parasitic, by the way. Mercury, which represents the life force. And salt, which represents the body, the earth. Spirit, the life force, and the body. Now moving on, we're going to talk about Jung very briefly. Over there I have his red book. Jung researched alchemy as well. He was really interested. Freud had a lot of mystical leanings. He Freud takes a lot of credit for inventing things that the Egyptians knew for thousands of years. So we would call him the father of modern psychology. He gets a really bad rap, perhaps deservedly so. Jung gets a really bad rap as well, perhaps also deservedly so. But the idea that there are aspects of ourselves that can't be seen, that influence our behavior in our lives, is invaluable. It really forms the foundation, certainly of the psychotherapy that I do. And I do refer to myself as a depth psychotherapist, which was, I think, a Jungian term. So he noticed that there was a lot of parallels to individuation. And interesting story, I don't know if it's true or if this is also just a mythology, but supposedly he had a dream about the emerald tablet, didn't know what it was, went and did some research, and therefore was introduced to alchemy that way, and began to develop a lot of his ideas of individuation based on probably the work that he was doing previously. But then all of this old stuff really illuminated his thinking with regards to it. All right. So in Jung's book, he says something very important. Not the red book. It's a book that specifically is on alchemy. He says the real root of alchemy is to be found not in the philosophical doctrines, but in the projections of the alchemist. Okay, so what that means is you can't learn alchemy by reading a book. You really can't learn alchemy by listening to somebody talk about alchemy. You have to be doing alchemy. This is the way to learn about alchemy, is to do it yourself, right? And we talked about that process. So it can't be conveyed through words. It has to be conveyed through experience. And it's very, very difficult to describe the experience to someone, even as you're walking them through it. Projection. So think about that. You have a perception. Your perception is based on the things that you take in through your sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, goes into the back of the brain, connects into memories of other experiences that you've had, and then comes into the prefrontal cortex where it makes sense. Okay, this is something that's happening. It makes sense to you. Doesn't mean it's truth, doesn't mean it's real. It's a projection. It's a perspective. It's an opinion. And that has as much weight, particularly when we're talking about non-physical reality like spirituality or psychology. Your perception has just as much weight, if not more, than reality. So I get a lot of people who come and they say, I don't want to talk about this because I don't know if it's real. I don't know if it really happened. And I'm like, okay, we have to take that and put it to the side. It doesn't matter if it really happened. What matters is what your perception of the experience was. We start from there and then we begin purifying it through psychological. We have a different way of heating things up psychologically. So, so Jung identified this. It is an unconscious transformation of consciousness through an identification with the process. See the theme? Alrighty. Any questions or comments on any of that? Anyone? Okay, we're good. So now let's go to this first handout. This is on the Facebook page. It'll go a lot better if you can look at it, but you don't have to. So did you know that the conscious mind is just the tip of the iceberg? And you guys have all seen this. You can easily recall having seen this iceberg image with nothing inside. There's a reason there's nothing inside. That's because they didn't know what to put in there. So one day I sat down and decided that I was going to put some things in there. So if you go down the one side, we have the active dynamic process of conscious mind, subconscious, and unconscious. This is the healthy process of the mind. This is the way that it's structured. This is how it's supposed to be. The conscious mind is meant to hold a lot of information so that you can have access to it as instantly as you need it. That's a strange noise on the microphone. That strange noise is the sound of the water going through the
I
tube.
love that.
And unfortunately, I can't prevent that. It might disturb the recording. I hope it doesn't. The conscious mind can only hold about, well, you know, when I went to school 30 years ago, they said the conscious mind can hold 7 plus or minus 2. We could probably have a different discussion about that these days, how much information the conscious mind can really hold. There are people who can hold vast amounts of information. I think the brain is evolving as well as consciousness is evolving, and we're capable of holding a lot, but we don't necessarily have to, because the subconscious can hold quite a lot. That's what reminds you, why did I walk in this room? You sit there and the subconscious mind says, your glasses, right? Or whatever. You wanted to get the book. So that's where that information is stored, when it's stored properly. And then the unconscious mind is this kind of mysterious reservoir of a lot of things that we tend to use less when it's functioning properly. And then if we go even deeper into that, then we arrive at what Jung called the collective unconscious. So at some point, all of our conscious minds are connected. We all have a shared sense of what it's like to be alive on the planet, to be alive as part of a culture group, to have some kind of sense of language, some kind of sense of what symbols mean, some kind of sense of mythology. All of that's coming out of the deep collective unconscious. And when we get these cleared and people start to have synchronicities, they start to see numbers, they start to see these patterns, what that means is that you have enough cleared in your subconscious and unconscious that information is starting to come through from the collective unconscious, which probably has a connection to the higher self. So it could be you sending yourself beacons just to let you know that you're there. Or if that's difficult for you, you could perceive it as a higher source spirit. So that's when things are going well. Got it? Pretty clear. When things aren't going well and we have an experience in our lives, which is way more common than it really was ever designed to be, when your life was threatened, when your way of life was threatened, when your needs and expectations were not met, particularly in early childhood. But, you know, we set the templates in early childhood, and then we see these reenactments as we go through life, because we file these things away, right? They're not going through the brain adaptively the way that I just described. They go down via the vagus nerve, along with the fight, flight, fight reactions. Really, it's all flight, by the way, but we can break it down into different things. And it gets stored physiologically. We have a number of really interesting people who've taken the time to go through and prove that. If you want to do the research on ncbi.com. Disease plus body organs, Ayurveda maps it out really well. Chinese medicine Chinese medicine, which also has its own form of alchemy, also describes this process really well of how our experiences get internalized into our physical organism and they get tucked away, right? I do this, right? Adaptive information flow, dysfunctionally stored information, and then it gets sealed with a dissociative barrier, right? And the reason that I do that is because if I'm with a person that I'm doing psychotherapy with and we're in their subconscious mind, they may think they're 5, they may be pre-verbal, but they're going to remember these hand gestures and they're going to understand them. And I find people get to that place. It's not uncommon. It's quite frequent. So it gets tucked away. You've got a part that's holding the emotion, and then you've got another part that's tasked with the responsibility of making sure that emotion doesn't get out. So the process of psychotherapy is going into the subconscious mind, preparing people with something that's safe. You start by preparing them with something that's safe, something that's solid, something that's physical and real. You start with earth. Oh, you start with earth. Let me finish doing this and then I'll go back to I'll talk about the Emerald Tablet translation again. You start with earth. So you have to start with something physical and something real. Because if you don't do that, then you have nothing for anyone to return to. You're just digging up psychological trauma. You're re-traumatizing the client and you're not creating a really safe space for transformation. So it all starts with earth, just like it says here in the third paragraph. So if you look at the first translation, Blavatsky's translation at line 7, its power is perfect if it is changed into this earth. Earth, earth, earth. So I like to use mindfulness. I like to use mindfulness, and I like to use my version of mindfulness. And the way that I offer mindfulness to people is I say, put your feet on the ground and bring your awareness to your breath. A lot of my clients come in very highly traumatized. Many of them have had years, if not decades, of therapy in the past. They've been through the loop. They know what their psychological traumas are. They understand where they're getting caught. They've done all that cognitive behavioral talk therapy. They just still can't transform it. So I tell them to start, and so they have a lot of trauma, right? There's a lot going on in there. There's a lot of lack of safety. There's a lot of not feeling good enough. There's a lot of feeling like you need to be responsible or in control of your environment. Does that ring a bell for anybody? Yeah, it should. It's pretty common experience. So those are the sort of things that get tucked away dysfunctionally, usually accompanied by the emotion of shame and then concealed with fear. Don't go there. Turn back. Go away. So this is, Gurdjieff talks about the Kunda buffer, the blocker, the barrier. It's this impenetrable wall. If you study magic, we talk about it quite a bit. The kind of fear obstacles that are placed in the way of people who are not ready for that teaching. Well, I like to just blast that open. Well, maybe I like to gently spray it down with the mister. Let's say that. At first, at least, while they get used to this idea that you can look at these contents in the subconscious and feel the heat of what's going on there and be able to tolerate it. Time to swap it out.
Wow, that's really shining a light.
Oh my. So what we want when we go into the subconscious mind, and I don't go into the unconscious mind. I did that before, and then I did it twice. I went with some clients into unconscious mind. And then I never saw them again. So there's no point in doing that. That doesn't help anybody. If they're not coming to therapy, that's not beneficial. So I tend to stay in the subconscious, although I go very deep into the subconscious. And you find these masses of conscious, of thought, right? So it's accessible because it's in the subconscious. A lot of times, particularly in the first 6 months, you're dealing with things that you already really know about yourself. And then you start to get to this lovely place where people say, well, I know that. Actually, I didn't know that. I'm putting it together right now as I talk about it. Wow, that really changes my perspective. And then they have to sit on the couch for a day and think about what they just learned about themselves and their situations, because all of the perspectives become reorganized now. You're purifying it from a foundational level, and everything needs to reorganize. And that can be a little strange feeling because the conscious mind doesn't have any ability to control or regulate it. So you go back and you do more mindfulness. Ground them in mindfulness every single session. So these squiggles here, right? Say we're going to work with something as common in the very center as a belief, I'm not good enough, right? I need to be better. There's something with my appearance. I need to watch what I eat. I definitely should not be eating that. Oh no, I should not be thinking so much about what I'm eating. So we have these trails of thought. Right? I need to get perfect grades. I gotta be, oh my goodness, my parents are going to kill me. I'm going to die. I'm so embarrassed. This is the worst thing, right? So you have these trails of thinking. Sometimes they connect, sometimes they don't, and sometimes they cluster. Right? Sometimes they tend to cluster. And what you want to do is what I want to do is I want to find these clusters, and I want to start differentiating each one, pulling out each constituent thought. Okay, today we're just going to look at the part of you that wants to move, wants to get a new job. We're just going to look at the part of you that wants to get a new job. That's it. We're just going to look at that one part, and we're going to talk just about that one part. And if any other part comes up, we ask that part to step back. That's great. I love that you have an opinion. I recognize that you have all of those concerns. If that part could please step back, that would be great. We only want to focus on listening to this one part. We're differentiating. So we're making a distinction between one idea and another idea. Usually I start with the difficult ones like fear or shame. And that's what's down there at the bottom. All right, so we have awareness, we have repression. I don't feel like dealing with that right now. I'll tuck it away. We're very fortunate that we have a system that's designed to do that. The problem is that we think we can tuck everything away, and eventually we realize that the container is full. No more can be tucked. There's no more that we can put in a box. There's no more of ourselves we could put in a closet. This is when people usually show up for therapy, by the way. And then there's sublimation. Holy cow, that was so horrible. I'm going to take the conscious mind has nothing to do with this. This is the inner wisdom that exists in the subconscious mind. That was so terrible that I'm going to take that memory and I'm going to stuff it somewhere, and you will not be able to access it for your entire life. You're going to just forget about that forever. You can do the work to uncover it and reveal it. And the work could look like psychotherapy. It could look like getting a still. It could look like making a tincture. It could look like a lot of things, right? There's a lot of ways. But without doing that work, it's very, very difficult to get the unconscious mind to yield that information. That memory just isn't going to come up for you. So, this is why we all know people who have so many years of living in such a particular way. They could go and get help to make things better for themselves and those around them, but it's so embedded in there that it just feels way too overwhelming to even start the process. But I've worked with people who are in their 70s, and I assure you the process is something that can be done. All right. How's everybody doing?
Like musical chairs for me.
See, now that chair is shady.
Right, now this one is shady.
Yeah, it's only down.
Ah,
Oh, damn it.
No. Any questions?
I'm the
or
one that
comments?
wore long pants like an idiot, so I'll suffer.
Any questions or comments?
Well, I've always heard it can build people's minds, but I didn't know as much about it and how it would tie so nicely to today's topic. I really enjoy how you group it together.
I have more.
Okay.
Are you full? Is it
No,
too
I'm,
much?
I'm enjoying.
Okay,
Really
good.
enjoying.
Good, good. Every time I do this, I pick up a little bit more along the way. And I've been using this tip of the iceberg for a really long time. I just modified it for our event because it was messy. It was based on old ideas that I had about it. I drew a diagram, and then over time, because every single client that I have gets this talk, every single one. A lot of these things that we're talking about, and they have to, because if they don't, then they get into the subconscious mind and they feel very disoriented and they don't understand what's going on, and their safety alarms go off. So I have to make sure that there's a lot of information that's shared before I start doing this. Okay. Yeah, thanks. I know, because we think, maybe some of us have had experiences with psychotherapists, and a lot of us have had experiences that have not been good with psychotherapists. My peers were really interesting people. I felt like I couldn't relate to any of them. I got a degree in psychology and religion, and I figured that made sense, but a lot of people really don't perceive psychology from these perspectives at all. I do have a colleague who is a Jungian therapist. I think it might be getting too hot. What's that?
It's the liquid in the jar. One,
No, it's chilly. It's actually chilly. So you think it's okay?
yeah, I have more ice like now than a little bit.
Okay. See the flower?
Could you talk a little bit more about how a spiritual process has to revisit these uncomfortable things? 'Cause I think a lot of times I get the impression that spirituality is focusing only on the positive.
So the two things that I want to talk about is the Emerald Tablet translation, and then I want to talk about the 4 stages of alchemy. There are a lot of, there's 4 stages, 3 stages, 7 stages, 11 stages, 13 stages. I'm going to just focus on 4 for simplicity's sake for today. And I think that that will cover a lot of what you're describing. And if I don't, then we'll come back to it. But spiritual, there are a lot of people. This is tricky, and I don't want to be judgmental about anybody's spiritual path, and that's why you see me hesitating. There's a lot of tendency with modern spirituality to want to really focus on the positive aspects of it and not focus on the negatives. And I'll just say, okay, I would imagine that there are people who do that and they make it work. I would advise against spiritual bypassing, which I see quite a bit of. It's like ignoring really important things. Like I'm being abused because I'm just going to focus on the positive would be a really good example of spiritual bypassing. And it's done in the name of trying to be higher and better. And I think that we all have certain frequencies that we're capable of dialing into right? We have a bandwidth. And so if I wake up in the morning and I'm down here, then I may really not be able to access the higher ends of my biorhythmic bandwidths. Is it beneficial to do that? Or as a person who is predominantly Buddhist in their approach and advocates for mindfulness, my answer is always going to be, you should be where you're at. Be where you're at. Be with what's real for you. If you have to go to a party, you might not want to be down on the low end of bandwidth. You might want to send out a more positive part that's not feeling low and slumpy. But you also need to come back to that. Then you would repress the part that's not feeling well. You would need to come back to it at some point in time and spend some time really examining why you're feeling low and slumpy. So I think it really sets us up for a lot of more shame when we say you should just focus on the positive. You should just forget that you had that bad experience. Let's never talk about it again. That's not healthy for the person who had the bad experience. But then again, the people that we're talking to may not be able to receive what we have to say. And that's why we have professionals. Like, I'm sorry if I've told you this story again. I'm like, that's what I'm here for. Tell me the story as many times as you feel that you need to. But I'm just telling you, if we keep working on this, you shouldn't need to tell the story a whole lot more. And that is true. The stories do tend to change. Was that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that you're talking about how
I mean, I like to do things in detail. I like to do things in depth. I do ritual magic. I don't do a whole lot of Wicca. Wicca is wonderful. It's great. Anybody can do Wicca. You can walk around the street and you see something sparkle and you pick it up, and that is now a magical item. I feel like I need to do 2 hours worth of ritual in order to produce something like that. But that's just me. That's just me. That doesn't need to be everyone else, and it doesn't need to be everyone's truth, because there can be multiple truths simultaneously. But I'm not a super fan of let's just focus on only what's good, particularly because of the work that I do. If all we did was focus on the positive, we wouldn't get the healing that we need. So we've got 3 copies of the Emerald Tablet here in the handouts. Because again, I can't just give you 1 copy, I have to give you 3. But you learn from diversity, right? So the first one is probably my favorite. It's Madame Blavatsky. She was a theosophist. She was very interested in alchemy. She wrote quite a bit on it. She has a lovely body of information if you ever want to read. She brought a lot of teachings from more Asiatic cultures to Europe. And then a lot of Europeans and Americans, Canadians, I suppose we would add into that. I don't like to use terms East and West, but maybe people who are not Asian. She brought these concepts to English-speaking cultures. How about we say that? So the Asian concepts became very, very easy to digest, very easy to understand, not as esoteric, not as abstract. I like abstract because I think it puts me into an interesting state, a less physical state. But it's a truncated version. You can see the lines are numbered. The only version that's here that has all of the lines is the 3rd version from Crowley. But I think that, so I included it so that you could see the lines, and because you need to have Crowley's version.
I like Crowley's version.
I like Crowley. I haven't studied enough Crowley that I'm at the place where I don't like him anymore, but I really like him. And then the second one is a Chinese version, and I don't know how old this is. It could have been done like 30 years ago for all I know, but it's written very much in the style of the Tao Te Ching. The father of it is the elixir, the sun Yang, and the mother is the moon Yin. The wind bore it in its belly. Here's the belly. Here's the belly. The wind is your breath. So I really like the imagery there. I really like the way it sounds. The guardian of mysteries. It's very, very classic Lao Tzu. Darkness within darkness. So if we look at Blavatsky's version as our primary text. So everyone has heard, it has made its way into the collective unconscious, as above, so below. This is where it came from. That which is below is like that which is above. There is some sort of mirroring. There is some sort of universal essence that pervades reality from the base of the physical existence all the way up to the highest of realms that we can even imagine. As all things were produced by the mediation of one being, so all things were produced from this one by adaptation. Everything came out of that essence. It is the Father, is the Son, its mother is the moon. It is the cause of all perfection throughout the whole earth. Cause. It is the cause for all perfection. So in alchemy, we perceive the universe and all things contained with it as perfect. That there is an essence that we can connect to that is good, that is right, that is wholesome, that is nourishing and beneficial and will help us grow. And if we can connect in to whatever that is, then it will become part of our energetic system on a conscious level, because it's already a part of our energetic system on a subconscious level and an unconscious level. And this is very radically different from some people's ideas that the world is flawed, that there are evil things out there, and we experience them as suffering. But we have something else that we can identify with that is perfect. So I'll leave you to hopefully plant that seed so that, because that's kind of heavy, it's a heavy chunk to chew on. Could you get me a tissue, please? This morning I was going through all of my different preparations that I have in storage, and I picked up this big jar of extremely hot peppers and took a sniff of it. And now my sinuses are all cleared out, which, by the way, is another anti-parasitic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cayenne.
Yeah.
Let me give him a second to come back.
I like that.
I've
noise.
never heard it make that sound
like that.
before.
Yeah. Something that's good about it.
I had a friend whose mom used to make me it was like 3 or 4 squeezed lemons, just a tiny bit of honey, and then a ton of cayenne.
Yes.
And it would cure you of any illness you seem to have. And it would totally, and there was garlic cloves in it.
Oh, now we're
It was,
talking.
it was something.
Somebody said garlic.
Yeah, yeah,
Garlic, lemon, honey, and
yeah.
I like all of those
Aw,
ingredients.
It would do you right.
someday it would do something.
It would do something.
I thought I was getting sick. I thought I was going to have like some head cold for like a week. And literally within 3 hours, I felt better.
It's
You
going.
just drank it and it was,
It was warm. It was big.
yeah.
It was, I drank the whole thing down in one go. She's like, she just made it for me. She may have had some, I'm sure there was water in it,
Is
but
it
it was strong.
warmed
It
or,
was warm.
yeah,
It was,
to dissolve maybe some of the tiny.
I mean, the garlic chunks are still in there. She
Oh,
said,
yeah,
just don't
that's
drink
me.
all that, but you know.
Oh,
You
I
can drink all that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
garlic
Yeah.
queen.
suck that garlic down.
Yes.
Eat it. Crush it, let it sit for about 5 minutes
Uh-huh.
so that they say that activates the constituents in it, the antibacterial, and
We
then
love garlic at our
Did
house,
you
but
see the cloves?
what
raw?
do you think about the garlic that's already left in water? I know, that's what
No,
I'm wondering. No, it doesn't taste the same.
no,
No.
not responding. We saw the face, so we
There's
know
it's
the
a
answer.
non-judgmental, it's simply a noticing.
I actually use crushed garlic from the grocery store. I buy it in the big containers,
Okay.
and you'll see that there's a lot of garlic on the counter as well.
Right.
And it really just depends on my energy levels that
Me
day.
too. Me too.
If I'm doing really well, then I'll take the garlic and put it in a blender, my Vitamix, with
That's
some
a good
olive
idea.
oil. Right, I got my olive oil from Beirut
Okay.
and at the Indian market, and then I'll store it that way in the refrigerator.
Oh, okay.
But we have and we do.
I try to
From time
feel
to
it
time.
and do it every time, but every now and then I'll resort to the other.
It's hard enough for me to
Yeah.
cook.
I like the peeling process, like the actual process of peeling it and.
I like bashing it with something heavy like that.
I like buying implements for garlic, the
Oh, yeah.
moulinators and
Right.
the rollers. I've had the rollers, and now I have a little thing with a motor and a button that goes and it grinds it up really super fast. As opposed to chop, 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 chop.
Right.
So Sally was just talking about honey and lemon and water and garlic and cayenne for ailments. And we have a comment here. My great grandmother lived through the Spanish flu in 1918 and told me she never got sick because she wore a garlic necklace and chewed it every day while going out to work as a seamstress. She lived with us when I was a kid. She definitely supports what you're saying. Oh, that's great. Yes.
Candy necklace.
Yeah. Mhm.
Garlic candy.
That reminds me of the thieves oil, which a lot of people can get, which I have made. You can make a mixture of a lot of different antibacterial oils, and supposedly that was what people used during the bubonic plague. The thieves, so that they could go and rob the bodies and not get sick and die.
Not smell them.
Right. My mom would tease her and say she didn't get sick because people wouldn't go near her due to the smell. Right, right. That's why you buy nowadays we have kyolic, the
Right.
denatured garlic. Take 6 tablets of that, and that should knock out. I used garlic extensively to get rid of my Lyme when I was really sick. I continue to use garlic to this day. It's one of the things that I take and eat because I need a lot of antibacterial activity going on. We're gonna need another mason jar soon. Line 7 is where the emerald tablet really gets into alchemy. So we have the earth, we have the fire. We're separating the subtle from the gross, right? The gross is that dense plant material. The subtle is what's coming up. Acting prudently and with judgment. Ascend with sagacity, because you know how to do Olympic, so you have wisdom. Ascend from earth to heaven and unite together the power of all things, inferior and superior. Thus you will possess the light of the whole world, and we're going to get back to that light, and all obscurity will fly away. This thing has more fortitude than fortitude itself, because it will overcome every subtle thing and penetrate every solid thing. By it the world was formed. So again, they're talking about that rarefied essence that pervades all of reality. I believe in the benefits of garlic for sure. Thank you for this lesson. Thank you for your comments and your attendance. I'm glad you're enjoying it. We can apply this process to everything. Think about fire. Think about heat. Think about the intensity of life, the intensity of overwhelm, the intensity of, what we might call anxiety or depression or trauma or any kind of mood instability, right? I don't like to think about mental illness. I just like to think that it's very hard for us to adapt in a world that's really not designed for humans very much anymore. It's inherently traumatic in its design in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of fire, there's a lot of friction, there's a lot of heat, there's a lot of points where we come into abrasion. We're using some sort of force. There's some sort of force that's there. A lot of times, when we go back to this and we see these two lines that are going off, right? We can have clusters of ideas and we can have ideas that go off in strings. These ideas are often in conflict, right? So talking about dissociation and kind of leaving reality to go into some sort of shadow world, some sort of sublimated shadow world, leaving time, leaving space, leaving the body, constricting yourself emotionally or expanding yourself emotionally, being labile. I'm an excellent example of lability, by the way, right? I'm very expressive. You know what I'm thinking, you know what I'm feeling at any given moment. Very, very labile. Not that that's a bad thing. But it is a form of dissociation. The most common one that we see are these parts that are in conflict. I work with a lot of college kids. I live 5 minutes from the university. And I get a lot of this. My parents want me to do this, and I want to do that. And that's been the story of my life. I hear that all throughout all age ranges. I feel like I'm supposed to do this, but I want to do that. And they don't know how to reconcile those two things. You actually can do both sometimes. Sometimes they want to do things that they really can't or are illegal or irresponsible. And then those things that we want to do that we're not supposed to be able to do get sublimated and they become part of the shadow world. All right, I'm going to take a break. Any questions or comments? Alchemy is everything. It's all throughout every aspect of your life. It's everywhere. The heat of transformation. Embrace that. Choose when you see it, be present, put your feet on the ground, bring your awareness to your breath. You only have to do it for a second. Even a second provides the perfect environment for the transformation to happen. And that will happen according to the inner wisdom. The inner wisdom will make a determination about the safety of the situation and will send parts forward so that they can be made conscious. Does that make sense? Okay. Repeating myself again and again. Maybe you can tell my training is Asian hard too. All right. Any questions or comments? Are y'all good? Did y'all get everything? I'll just keep an eye. So we're almost done. Do you have my other jar?
Monsieur.
Thanks for coming.
I really learned a lot from you. Yeah, very interesting.
Before you go, have Eric give you a little jar.
I didn't know how long.
I'd say we have another 15, 20 minutes. Okay, cool. I have one more key concept, and we have enough that we can stop the distillation at any point. Okay.
I was just thinking I was enjoying the repetition because you'd say different things with the same thing, and it's like new, you know, connections are formed. And oh, okay. So every time you said it, a new connection is formed.
The perception, so you see the alchemical process.
Yeah.
Here, this one's the first one, so go put that on the table. And this is the second one. Okay. I really thought I was going to spend more of my time on these 4 concepts, but you never know how these things are going to unfold. But we're at an hour and a half, so we're doing good on time. Okay. I have the 4 processes on the Blavatsky translation. They are nigredo, albedo, citrinatus, and rubedo. Right here.
Oh, wonderful.
Nigredo, albedo, citrinatus, and rubedo, Latin. Nigredo is the most important, okay? And this nigredo is blackening. It's a blackening. So this refers to the dark night of the soul. This refers to the point. Alchemy is a conscious thing, okay? So there are people who can have a dark night of the soul, and they went to, I see this quite frequently too. They go to a Kundalini yoga class, and then they land in my office. Whoops, how did that happen? And the yoga instructor may or may not have a good grasp of the Kundalini process. They may or may not have a good grasp of what's going on, and they're wise to say, you need to go seek somebody out. And because I've got all that psycho-spiritual wording on my Psychology Today advertising, they land typically in my office, right? Because if you were having a spiritual crisis, you'd probably want to go to see somebody who says that in their narrative. So a dark night of the soul can just kind of happen. You could take some LSD. That happens to people eat a pot brownie and discover that cannabis psychosis is a real thing, and it happens to them, and they should never be smoking cannabis or eating it. That's a real thing. So they have a bit of a dark night of the soul. Cannabis is a master teacher. It brings up for you aspects of shadow that need to be confronted and worked with. But not everybody chooses to have a life path where they're really doing this kind of work. Not everybody really wants to do that. And not everybody wants to do it full steam ahead either. But once you kind of get into this place of nigredo, there's no turning back. That Awapuhi ain't never going to look like this again, right? It's never going back to where it was. And so there's a lot of feelings of like, I need to control this. I need to get this under control, instead of like, why don't you just take the day off of work and sit in bed, take a bath, maybe journal a little bit. Don't play video games or watch TV because that's dissociation. And really kind of try to be present with yourself as much as you can while you're going through these difficult processes, because that's what's going to transform them into something that's more useful for you later. It's really hard to get people to a place where they feel like they could have the confidence to do that, which is why mindfulness is so important, and actually doing things like EMDR to reinforce mindfulness so that it becomes stronger, doing EMDR, doing ego state therapy with the dissociation, and just talking about stuff and getting to know and building basic trust, so that all of this becomes more foundational. And then when people go into the ground just dropped out from underneath me, they don't feel a need to immediately restore it back to where it was quite as quickly. They can sit with it in discomfort slightly. And it's really necessary. So in some sorts of shamanism, you have a person who gets up and they have a rhythm with a drum or something to a heartbeat rhythm. And they may have a vision, they go into the individual's energetic presence. I'm not fully sure how that works because I don't have training in that. and they find the soul and they retrieve it and they bring it back, and that can feel very good. What I do is I use the rhythm of the bilateral eye movements instead of the sound, and I send them in to go and find the last aspect of their soul.
You go find it. Get in there.
And then we have a little talk with it while we're in the subconscious mind. I set up a space and we go in and we find that part. And I find them in gutters. I find them in the places where they were abused. I find them in all, oh my goodness. Most often where I find them, I tell them, that's one of the first things I do. Hey, how are you? How do you feel about being talked to? It's kind of weird. Well, we just like to know how things are for you down there in the subconscious mind. And then I'll say something like, take a look around and tell me what you see. And they're like, I don't see anything. And I'm like, okay, well, let's draw some eyes on you so that you can see. Because they don't even have eyes. They are rarely humanoid. Sometimes they're humanoid. Oftentimes they're wisps of, they're completely undifferentiated aspects of self. But they carry all kinds of very strong voices. And then I have them look around and it's dark. You know, if they're seeing a scene, I'm in the parking lot. I'm in my bedroom. I'm in the closet. And then what other parts do you see? I see this part, this part, this part. What does it look like? Well, they're very mean. They're very dark. So these are dark places. This is a real thing. That shadow is really very tangible at this point when you're in this place. We have stored some of the most difficult things we have ever experienced. We could call it shame if we had to call it something, but it's really more of an energetic, with shame being a component of that quite frequently. An experience where we had to contract and become small, or actually break off from our primary identification of self. And this was necessary for survival. So that some part of you could continue to move forward in an untenable situation while another part of you was going through it. So when we get to Negredo, we're exposing all of that. The turmoil of the Negredo is a powerful defender to keep things the way they are in the system of the psyche. At the core of unconscious programming, it doesn't give up very easily. It requires a lot of will on the part of the conscious parts of self that want to get better. This is what makes the dark night so hard, is that it is fighting tooth and nail at a survival level to not become a parent. If you choose to enter that, you have to have endurance and you have to have bravery and commitment. And it's characterized by heat. Fear is the barrier. And if you want to learn a little bit more about this barrier, then I suggest you Google Brene Brown and YouTube. She talks a lot about shame shields and how we shield ourselves from the feelings of shame that we have hidden deep inside. That's not the only thing. I'm just going to that because in the world of psychology, that's very, very common, that's what comes up when we start to get into the unconscious. There's a lot of anger, there's a lot of sadness, there can be some grief, and there can be some anxiety, worry, but it's that shame that really rattles a person and grabs onto them. And so a lot of times those other things, fear, anxiety, and anger, are a protective barrier against the deep humiliation of having had those experiences happen to us that we would be able to prevent as an adult, but we sure couldn't prevent them when we were a child. And maybe we can't even prevent them as adults because we reenact what's buried there. So We are approaching the unruly world of Negredo with the intention of bringing our spiritual selves, our mindful self, our whatever spiritual practice we do, we bring all of that along with us. And then we greet these parts for the first time often. And this becomes our sacred quest, to find these pieces and bring them back into the breath, into the body, and into the present moment where they can actually do their job better because they're functioning from the present reality rather than that 10-year-old reality. So if you choose to take up the great work, this is the stage where you hear the calling. This is where the veil of obscuration is parted and we enter into that path. If you're not up to it, then your options are stasis, staying the same, or putrefaction, decay. The next stage is a little bit, well, a little easier. It's called albedo, and that's the whitening or illumination, okay? So the light of consciousness is penetrating the shadow world of the subconscious mind. We're bringing things to awareness that we usually can't see. We're retrieving, we're beginning that process. We've brought a piece back, right? We've gone through it, we understand it, we've brought a piece back. We're starting to feel how that really improves the quality of the system. We realize this is the process. Things are starting to begin to make sense. The conscious mind is penetrating in to the subconscious. This is where Jung came up with anima and animus. So we have a part of us that is a front part that goes out into the world and dresses nicely and speaks nicely and uses the fork properly. We have a manager that tells us you better not say that. That's not going to go over well, right? Those parts are starting to get recruited into the service of going into the distorted perceptions. Those parts are now starting to have access to all of these other pieces of information, and it's all becoming illuminated. Make sense? Okay. Citrinitas is a third part. Some people say it's really the second part. We've shined the light of awareness. We know where we're getting stuck, but we aren't quite at the point where our will is enough to create the transformations we're seeking. There's a lot of density and a lot of obscurations, unresolved issues, dysfunctionally stored information, and there aren't enough adaptive resources. The things that we do to provide us with that high frequency energy that nourishes the core of our soul essence. Citrinitas is the point where these resources are now strong enough. You know I I should be doing those things. I just can't quite do it. Citrinitas is like, you know what? Now I'm doing it. Now I actually no longer feel any of those barriers. This corresponds to the moment where the steam enters the hat and plummets, right? It just needs a little bit of tipping point. You get that all the way up to this point, and it just crumbles over. And then we add the cold. So if I were to do the 13 processes, we might be able to get more into what's happening there. So there's this concept called dual consciousness in EMDR, and dual consciousness is being able to have one foot in the present moment, one foot in the wise, conscious self, the part that wants to get well, the adult, the part that already has been, because spirit is timeless, right? There's no such thing as time. There's no such thing as space. That only exists at the dense level of Earth. At the level we're talking about now, time doesn't exist. So the you of the future that has already finished going through all of these processes of individuation, it's already gone through the alchemical transformation. It is now, the pathway is now strong enough for it to be embodied in your consciousness. And then you turn towards your parts that are holding distress with compassion. I'm so sorry, honey. That's really terrible. I can see that it's been very hard for you. Well, I'm here for you. It's okay. I'm going to listen to you. I'm not going to push you away any longer. You don't have to go back into the dark space. And then I put that part, possibly, that part will agree to come into the feet. How would you like to come into the feet? Do you think that would be safe? Do you think that sounds interesting to you? Let's come into the feet. Let's come into the breath. How does it feel? You doing okay? All right. Look through the eyes and find the source of light. Do you see the sun? For some reason, everybody always does therapy on Zoom when they can see the sun. Go and look at the sun. Oh. This is your birthright. This was for you. This was where you're supposed to be. It's a beautiful moment. Yeah. And then just a couple sets of rhythmic eye movement. This is to help you find your way back whenever you want. And now you've got integration. Now you've got wholeness. Now you've got a part that's no longer trapped in a prison in the shadowy spaces of the world, but it's really achieved this final stage of rubedo. Rubedo is symbolized by the rose. Right? We use that symbol in our magical work, don't we? The rosy cross, the place where time and space meet. And this is the final stage of the great work. It's associated with gold and the philosopher's stone, the reintegration of the shadowed parts to create an integrated, wise self that cannot be reversed, ever, ever. The soul, it is a transformation at the level of soul. And if you believe in rebirth, when you are reborn, you will be reborn at that level, right? You have done the work on your soul's journey forever. And that's it. Wow. Lovely. Y'all feel different?
Mm-hmm.
Could you remind us what different uses there could be with the stuff that you still, the Awapuhi solution?
So after you spot test it and make sure that you're not reactive to it, probably shouldn't be sitting in the sun. I would take this home and I'd use it. I mean, you can save it if you really want to. Some people want to save stuff. You can put it on your face. You can put it in your scalp. You can put it on your hair. You could put a little bit. You can consume a little bit as a flavoring for any kind of preparation that you want to make and give it a try. If you have some stomach issues, you might try 2 or 3 drops and see how you do with it. See if it makes things calm down. Most people just put it in their hair.
Right.
Hey, Marco. Marco. Any other questions or comments from the people on the video? From the people here?
Oh, thank you for this presentation. And your knowledge. You're very well versed. Definitely.
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It was
You're
wonderful.
a wonderful teacher.
Thank
I'm so
you.
glad
You are.
I came today.
Thanks for playing with me, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Nope, that was really informative. Thank you. And thank you as well.